Hi, I'm Katie Waldrep. Thanks for watching Magnolia Outdoors. Today we are at Neil Pope Farms in Salem, Alabama. We're going to be talking to Farmer Garver and learning about his organic farming. To start out, tell me how you got here and tell me a little bit about your background.
Yeah, sure. A little bit about my background. I started off wanting to work in the audio industry as a recording engineer and became a music promoter. And through success and failure, learned that I wanted to do something more fulfilling with my life. So I took a few years and found an educational program in California. And it was a wonderful one-year program where you get as much class time as you do field time. And after that, I was sold. I went back to my native state of Ohio, did a season there on a wonderful farm, and then ended up coming down to the South chasing an old love, and have gotten stuck down here with the southern soils, as I like to say.
And how did you get into contact with Neil Pope and learn about starting this farm?
A mutual friend had referred me to Neil, or Neil to me, and Neil had written me an email asking me to come down and consult. At this time, just about a year ago, this was a conventional tomato farm. And they were recognizing that with the 3.5 acres of production we're currently capable of, they didn't have enough tomato production in order to commit to wholesale selling. And the region's not quite big enough for that many tomatoes as far as retail. So after a year of growing tomatoes, I advised Neil, he hired me as a manager, and I advised Neil that we diversify the product and also diversify the type of sales methods we're using so that we can reach out and be direct to the public.
And how are you doing that with the public? Tell us about how your co-op is getting going.
Well, we have a CSA program, Community Supported Agriculture, and that's where people basically pay a lump sum in the beginning of the season to receive a dividend amount, if you will, of produce each week. And that'll last us throughout the season, which our season's quite long, about 24 weeks.
Okay.
And then on top of that, we'll also be doing sales to some local restaurants, and also we may be putting up a market stand somewhere.
Tell me the prices of what the shares will be.
Our CSA shares, for a full share, which typically feeds about 4 to 6 people, is $600 for the season. And a half share, which typically feeds a couple of people, is $300. Now, of course, who that feeds all depends on how much you cook and really how enthusiastic you are for this type of food. We try to encourage each member to get into cooking more. Each week we'll be putting out an email telling each member what they're going to see for the week and probably a recipe or two to go with that.
And tell me the benefits of using these.
Well, most people, the first thing for most farmers that comes to mind is season extension, being able to grow earlier or later. And we do have a bit of a benefit, especially with the tomatoes with that. But really for us, it's the all year weather that this gives us a benefit with. We get so much rain here at one time that it can be damaging to the crops. So really these act as a big umbrella for us and also guard the plants from a lot of wind. We got a considerable amount of wind in here as well.
And bugs too?
Bugs, it can help with bugs and animals, definitely with rodents and that kind of thing as a deterrent because they sense our activity in here. With insects, we would have to add screens, which in some cases in the future we may do. And in regard to bugs, like I was saying with the fertilizer, we use organically improved inputs, and we have to be very careful and methodical with that. And we also use organic pesticides when necessary, but we leave it as a last resort.
What crops are you growing right now?
A little bit of everything. It's although we are a farm in transition, it's a big transition, and you almost would want to look at it more like a big garden than a small farm. For instance, it's very seasonal. Right now we've got a lot of greens, lettuce, kale, collards, that sort of thing, and that will be transitioning into your summer crops, like we have right before us. A lot of tomatoes, a lot of basil, a lot of peppers, okra, southern classics like black-eyed peas and pink-eyed peas, a large variety of squash and zucchini. We hand-pick certain varieties, some from around the world. We have French breakfast radishes. Now, obviously we got them growing here. This is a new stand over here. And these, we're about to start harvesting these in the morning. A little different than your typical radish. French breakfast radish, obviously red on top, white on bottom, is known to have a nice even texture top to bottom. and the flavor of these is outstanding compared to most radishes. Now, I have been told by several people that in France these are typically eaten for breakfast, sautéed in a pan, sliced, sautéed in a pan with sugar and butter. So, and I have tried it; it is quite good.
Yes.
A little different eating experience than most radishes. Not as hot as a radish can be, but not as bland as some radishes can be either. Yeah. This is 3 types of kale we're looking at. The one on the left is Rainbow Lacinato, and it's a wonderful variety developed by a man named Frank Morgan in Oregon, who's a plant genius. And then just this one row down the middle is a classic Italian kale. Some people call it Toscano or just regular Lacinato. Some people call it dinosaur kale. And it's become probably of the better varieties of kale, probably the more well-known and more popular over the last few years. Now this one here is new to me, and that's a Portuguese kale. A lot of people looking at it would think it's a collard green, but it's actually more tender than a collard green and most kales. And in Europe is widely known for a Portuguese kale and red bean soup. I'm new to growing it this year. From what I understand, the midrib, or the stem going up, is crunchy and sweet.
And you eat that part.
And you eat that part. And the leaves,
a lot of other kales, you tear that part off.
Well,
it's bitter.
And really it depends on the kale and the season. One thing people don't understand about kale typically is it likes to start warm and then get cold as it grows. Whereas spring kale, of course, is starting in the cold weather and getting warm. When that happens, it can be slightly bitter. It's better for cooking. Whereas fall kale is better for fresh eating. And fall kale, if it's getting cooler, the stems will sweeten up. They're really, really good.
Okay. So I do a lot of kale salads, and I juice with kale, and so but I just buy them from the grocery store. So I was just wondering what you would cook these types of kale.
Well, we do all sorts of things. The soup recipe I understand for the Portuguese is outstanding. The lacinato and the rainbow lacinato both, when we're at home cooking, our favorite dish to do is a stir fry, where we cook them in sesame oil with sesame seeds and a bit of ginger, and it is outstanding. It's just very, very good. An easy thing to do with it that a lot of folks do, and I like a lot, is chop it up into bite-sized pieces, stem, leaf, and all, and add that to a dish of roasted vegetables, possibly potatoes and carrots and turnips and that kind of thing, and season how you like, and it's wonderful that way.
Okay, love it. So what do you have here?
So this is Swiss chard, and is in the same family with spinach that we have over here. Also in the same family with beets. And Swiss chard and beets are almost botanically identical. Beet plant, of course, makes a nice root ball on the bottom that's edible, with leaves that can be tasty on top, whereas chard, through human intervention, was developed over the years to have a large, tasty leaf to it. And as you can see, there's different colors available. This is one variety that is bred to come up in different colors, whereas other varieties are the same color all the time. Another green that can be prepared in salads fresh, or put into soups, or even roasted vegetable dishes.
So the spinach over there, we're all used to going to the grocery store and getting a big bag of
big old bag of spinach.
So does it grow a lot more than that out here?
It depends on the kind of spinach. This kind is savoyed or wrinkled. And this type here we want, because we don't have a large window of time to grow spinach here, I wanted one spinach that could grow up big and get one crop. This kind of spinach will get about the size of a basketball, and then we'll take it down and serve it. Whereas other types in an area more hospitable to spinach, you can cut and come again and cut and come again several times.
Okay, because I know I go through a lot of spinach when you're trying to cook it.
I do too.
Down very quickly.
So this is a house of lettuce. And here we have a good example of companion planting, where we've got 2 different crops in one bed. Onions and lettuce get along very well together. So after we put this romaine lettuce in here, we put a row of onions right down the center. And these are a scallion type, or a bunching onion. And then these rows here, you can see we've got a lot of color. There's this is one of my favorites. It's called New Red Fire. I think it's very, very pretty. And then down here, we've got an unusual one. Actually, 2 unusual. So this here is a type of bib lettuce. And what's unusual about that is that it's green, but it's got those nice purple and red colors coming over wherever you see the ruffle. And this here is new to me. It's a high heat environment lettuce that is gigantic. And we call it devil ears. And most people probably wouldn't recognize it as lettuce, but it's very good.
Wow. It's a lot of types of lettuce.
There are so many kinds of lettuce. And one thing that's to our benefit is, pardon me, your higher heat tolerant lettuces that we can grow here happen to typically be the ones that have a lot of color and a lot of texture and a lot of flash, as well as flavor. And typically with any crop where you see more color and shape and size, you're bound to have more nutrition. You know, your head of iceberg lettuce out of the grocery store is pretty much water and cells, whereas this lettuce here is going to have more minerals, more vitamins, and some research shows that the better the lettuce, the better it is for your brain, actually.
Right. I know the nutrition-wise, they're supposed to say that the bright colors, you're supposed to have a lot of bright colors on your plate now.
Absolutely. And when we test different crops, we see that for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, these guys are ready to go.
Wow. So how long did it take, like, these to grow? How many weeks?
This lettuce here, most of these are 55 to 65 day varieties, but they've come on a little bit early for us. I think the warm spring we had probably pushed them a little bit. Give you an example. This is more of a 65 day variety. You can see it's still got room to grow, whereas these 55 day varieties, they're ready to go. Wow. And these were started by seed in our propagation house. So this is our propagation greenhouse. It's a controlled environment unlike our hoop houses. And that's so that we can raise seedlings in here and young plants in a comfortable environment. So let's go inside. So after you.
Thank you.
So yeah, this is our propagation greenhouse. You can see on all these tables we've got seedlings of different sizes. Right in front of you here, you've got different types of watermelons. A lot of people direct seed watermelons into the field. We like to do them first to ensure the crop. And looking around, we've got, these are leftover tomatoes from a house that we planted yesterday. Some flowers, marigold starts are behind you. And then right over here, we've got lots of zucchini and squash plants that are getting going. And then right here in the center of this table is all baby peppers. And kind of interesting, tomatoes and peppers, especially tomatoes, are what you call an adventitious rooter, meaning that they like to be transplanted. So we start these peppers, this tray here has 288 cells. We'll actually transplant these to a larger cell size and then to the field eventually. Some of these peppers will end up in our hoop houses, some of these will end up in the field. Some are very good old world varieties you usually don't see in the grocery store, like Spanish and Italian frying peppers that are long and pointed, usually yellow, red, or orange. Flavor usually better than most bell peppers. We do bell peppers as well. And then we've got some little specialty ones, like a little one called Gypsy. It's about this big, that a little 2-foot plant can outproduce most 5-foot pepper plants. Pretty extraordinary.
And this one's warmer?
This one is kept warm. We've got a furnace up there, and the shutter's there, and then a very powerful fan right there. That fan, it's important that you can empty out the temperature of all the air mass of your room in less than 1 minute when you're hot, and that can do the job.
And how many people work here? This seems like a lot of work.
Well, that's something that's been in flux.
Okay.
I currently have one gentleman that works with me full time, and 2 other guys that do other jobs around the farm that are not related to food production, and they sometimes help out, as well as 2 other full-time guys that are mostly dedicated to the equipment that we use for moving lots of earth, not necessarily farming, and they also help out sometimes. We're kind of being a farmer in transition. Well, in a lot of ways, this is really our first year. So we're going through some growing pains, and we're trying to feel out who we need where and when and how we need them.
Tell us about the property.
Sure. Neil Pope bought this property over a decade ago, and I think he had something in mind along these lines of what we're doing now. There's a couple things to note about it. It's a 100-acre property. We've got over 40 acres cleared now, and about 3.5 acres of that is available for production of food crops. And we plan to expand that year after year, as well as build more of these high tunnel hoop houses. They help us out a lot. Now currently we have no choice but to use municipal water like most people have in their home. But a project we have over here is a large water reservoir that's being built, or dug, I'm not sure which is the right term, that is 210 feet wide this way, and I'm not sure how many feet long, probably could be a couple thousand. And we plan to eventually have a dam at the end so we can fill it with water and provide our own water here for the crops and for the people. It's quite a large undertaking. They've been working on it for a good while and are currently working with engineers to make sure they built the dam correctly.
Okay, so now we're walking down to some of the open air. What would you call that? Open air fields?
Just a field.
Just a field.
We call them fields. You've got this field that we're walking to is 3 acres, and these tunnels that we produce in are now more than a half an acre. It's about 2/3 of an acre. And you will see some distinct advantages. Anything that we grow on this plastic mulch that's in these houses and in the field does a lot better than anything we don't. But a lot of things that we have to direct seed that get seeded close together that are inconvenient to start in a propagation house have to go right into the ground, and out in the field it's a big challenge with the soil type we have as well as the amount of rain we get. Around here with these heavy soils, if we get one of these torrential rainfalls like we had the other day, where several inches can drop in one day, it beats down the soil, and then the sun comes out the next day and it dries up faster than you can even imagine. And one thing that's tricky with that, you can have a dry crust 1 inch thick on top and everything on the bottom, and then you get below that first inch and everything else is soaking wet. So it's a very challenging thing to manage. Yeah. This here is a testament to some of the soil challenges. These peas, they're different kinds actually. This here is an English pea, a common pea like you'd buy in a can. This here is a snow pea, the flat type. And the English peas, this row and this row, were planted the day before these. These here, however, the next day we got one of those heavy rainfalls. And it puts so much moisture into the soil that we believe a little insect called a root maggot came in and ate all our pea seeds. And that's, again, just another soil and weather challenge there. Now these, it's not a crop typically grown all over the South. I have grown English peas in the South before with some varied success.
These not on the inside too, the covered?
No, the only thing that's on the inside too would be the lettuce right here.
Lettuce, yeah.
And you can see these are smaller. These are about 2 weeks behind.
Okay.
This here is cabbage.
Oh, okay.
You've got a purple variety called Ruby Ball and a green variety called Dutch Flat. And both cabbage is known to be able to be grown in the South. And we're expect those right now are about halfway grown. And you can see I ran out of, or had extra room, so I snuck a few extra kale plants in there.
Okay.
But we expect to have the cabbage ready about another 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
And then more lettuce, and we started intercropping more onions right here, but the weather has set us back on that a little bit. And you know, lettuce, and then over here we've got a row of turnips. This gentleman over there is thinning out the turnips. And then behind him we've got 3 rows of carrots, and then behind him I got mustard greens, and that purple is also a type of mustard green.
Wow.
And then 3 beds of carrots, and then more mustard greens. And then very soon this will be going into, just about to put in some dill and some cilantro. And then after that, several beds of peppers, all the peppers we saw in the propagation house. Most of those will be going there. And then probably about 2/3 of an acre of squash after that.
Okay.
So this is our hoop house of heirloom and artisan type tomatoes. Whereas the first house of tomatoes we were in are more production type, which is your classic red round. These here are all open pollinated, so no hybrids. So we could save seed potentially from them. But more importantly, this is where we get a lot of size, shape, and color. We've got some tomatoes like Aunt Jenny's purple over there that'll produce a very, very large purpley red tomato. Whereas we have some other ones, what's a good example? We have purple bumblebee, which is a purpley red tomato with green stripes, a little cherry.
Wow.
Little yellow cherries, and tomatoes that are oblong with stripes and all kinds of good stuff. Now those production tomatoes over there, those plants will maybe get to about 4 feet and have more of a concentrated harvest. Whereas these indeterminate artisan type tomatoes can get very tall in some climates. Here we'll probably get into about 7, 8 feet and be harvesting 3 days a week as soon as they start coming in.
Is that what they call like heirloom tomatoes?
Heirloom. Heirloom is a term referring more to time and heritage.
Okay.
And people argue, is heirloom 50 years old or 100 years old, just like antiques.
Okay.
The thing that's important about heirlooms is they're open pollinated. A hybridized tomato you cannot save seed from. Well, you can, but it's going to be the seed to seed, you're going to have inconsistent results from the parent. Whereas an open pollinated tomato, like an heirloom tomato always is, and there are other open pollinated tomatoes that are not heirloom, an open pollinated tomato is something that you can reliably save seed from, and in some cases too can keep you out of trouble. Some of these hybridized tomatoes can be plant variety protected, which means that you are incapable of selling a product from that plant without permission.
I know you said that when we first started talking about you're not a certified organic farm yet.
Correct.
Because it takes 3 years?
It takes 3, if you've had a previous farming activity on your farm and you want to go certified, there's a 3-year waiting period. And for good reason. Especially on really large corn and soybean farms where they're using a lot of chemicals. This place they weren't using so much, and while we do think we are probably going to get certified in 3 years, we don't know how important that is to us yet. The most important thing to us is that we're growing the food as sustainably as we can. And that is everything from the inputs we use, the fertilizers, pesticides, etc., to the techniques we use. And really more than anything, especially in this farm, is soil building. This soil, as you can see, is pretty typical red southern clay. And in order for, there's different kinds of red southern clay. This is one that does not drain particularly well. In order for us to get it to where we want it to be, we use a lot of compost. We minimize the tillage, the tractor use out here, as much as possible. And we're hoping that after a few years' time, we might even get to the point where we are a no-till farm, where the beds have so much good integrity in the soil that we simply mulch them and then come back the next season and replant. And that way, not only does that reduce the amount of tillage going on, it reduces the amount of fossil fuel we use, the amount of costs we have associated to those fuels, and I think just makes an overall friendlier environment. It really does. A word you hear a lot these days, which is local. We want to, of course, help our local economy because it benefits us and others, but we also want to have a big impact on the food system in this region. I mentioned before, this is one of the hardest parts of the country to grow vegetable produce in, and that needs to change. And we can change that, and there's farmers that are here long before me that are working on that, and I think there's a lot more to come. Why is local so important? A lot of people know that the average vegetable travels over 1,000 miles to get to your plate, and you can only imagine the packaging, the fuel spent, as well as the lack of freshness in that situation. So we want to be able to provide food to people that is very local, very fresh, and sustainably grown, which again means no synthetic chemicals, 0 genetically modified organisms, or genetically engineered organisms, as people like to call them sometimes. And we also pay attention to, for instance, our compost, what goes into that compost that was made. We test the soil in different places to make sure that, hey, even though I'm using organic substances, I could still cause pollution. So it's very important that I'm aware of what I'm applying it, where I'm applying it, and how much. And along with that, record keeping is very important. And we see that also in the sales end. With a local clientele, we see where our product is going, how much of it is going, and we get better feedback on what we should be growing, what people like.
Well, thank you so much for letting us come out here today, and we've really enjoyed coming to Neil Pope Farms.
Well, thank you for coming. It's been a pleasure. Absolutely. And we welcome anyone who's involved with our CSA program, or any customer we have, or anybody else interested in farming to get a hold of us. I'm sometimes free to talk to, although I'm very busy, and we love showing people around. People need to understand better where their food is coming from, and we'd like to be a part of that.
Thank you for watching Channel 7.